In the name of Almighty Allah, the most beneficent and the most merciful. Assalamu alaikum everyone. It is lecture number 2 of the subject History of English Literature 1, Medieval to Romantics. And today our topic is Introduction to Renaissance Age or Elizabethan period and Elizabethan drama. So Renaissance and Elizabethan period is the same because they are the name of the single period, and then we will also discuss why they are called so in the later slides. Okay, so let's start. Here we have the lecture outline. First we will discuss what is Renaissance, that it was a movement, it was a literary era or period in the history of English literature. Okay, so Renaissance literature, that in which genre the literature was produced, particularly in this period. When we will talk about humanism, that was the, you can say, dominant movement of this time period. Then there is Renaissance drama, university wits, and then there is Shakespeare. At the end there is conclusion and references. Okay, let's start. What is Renaissance? Renaissance means the revival of learning. So before going into before reading the slides, I would like to tell you people a bit background of this Renaissance age, what that age was. Basically what happened during the time of Middle Ages, almost majority of the literature, or you can say the scientific, historical, religious literature, that was lost, and no such you can say literature was produced which was of same merit as was of Greek. It means that there was a time period in the history when literature was not produced. What happened when the time came at like 16th and 17th, particularly 15th 16th century? So what happened? There occurred the rebirth of knowledge. Rebirth, why? Because Greek and Roman literature, that were the books were imported from different areas of the world into the Europe. As a result, the Europeans started their work on producing producing different books on different subjects like literature, history, science, medicine. So there occurred the rebirth of the knowledge. So what happened? In first phase, knowledge was produced, or you can say literature was produced by Greeks nation. But later on in 15th century, there was revival, there was rebirth of knowledge, and the credit goes to the European institutions which actually promoted this development, this rebirth of knowledge. So that is what we call as Renaissance. Renaissance means rebirth. Okay, Renaissance means the revival of learning. Yes, this revival of learning, I have already explained you how it was revival. Okay, and it denotes in its broadest sense the gradual enlightenment of the human mind after the darkness of Middle Ages. Yes, so what happened in the Middle Ages, we call it as the dark period in the history, because no notable, or you can say quality work was produced at that time. But it was started emerging on the scene right after 14th and 15th century, with the fall of Constantinople in 1453 AD by the invasions of the Turks. So in 1453 the Turks came into the power in what we called as Ottoman Empire. The Greek scholars who were residing there spread all over Europe and brought with them invaluable Greek manuscripts. All right, what happened in Constantinople? It is the current Istanbul in Turkey. So there was Constantinople, there were the rule of the Christianity. The Pope used to sit there, it was ruled from that, like it was the center of Christianity, you can say. But after the Turks invasion, they actually overtook this place and they started ruling this. And the Greek scholars who were residing there mean in the Constantinople, because Muslims had conquered that. So what happened, that the people who were residing there, they started spreading all over Europe. So as a result, they brought with them some invaluable Greek manuscripts. So they brought with them some Greek books. All right, so what happened? The discoveries and inventions of the Renaissance age. What type of discoveries, what type of inventions occurred at that time? We will look into that. Not only there was a rebirth of knowledge or literature, but certain discoveries, inventions also took place. Vasco da Gama circumnavigated the earth. Vasco da Gama was a person who actually took a tour around the earth. He navigated around the earth. Columbus discovered America. We all know that. That is in 1492. Copernicus discovered the solar system. He said that it is not the earth that is stationary and sun revolves around the earth, but sun is stationary and earth revolves around the sun. All right, so that was a totally different solar system that had been presented before. Okay, so books were printed at that time. Philosophy, science and art were systematized. The developments were taking place in the sense that books were printed. Philosophy in the field of science. As a result, there occurred a development in medicines, in technology, then art as well. In art, we see that Renaissance is one of the richest ages in the history of English literature, because literature produced in this age is still considered masterpiece. All right, and they are still taught in different colleges and universities. Yes, particularly if we talk about the Renaissance literature, so first we'll study which time period is called as Renaissance. Okay, the time period in the history of English literature from 1500 to 1600 is called Renaissance age. All right, so the literature produced at the time is named as Renaissance literature. That is why it is called Renaissance, because there was the rebirth of knowledge. So what happened at that time? People started a revival of learning, revival of knowledge, started reproducing books of Greek and Roman literature, and also got inspiration from those books and wrote other books as well. At that time, literature was mainly written in two genres, that is poetry and drama. So what we have to discuss here is that there are two main genres in which literature was produced, that is poetry and drama. As we have seen in the Anglo-Saxon and Anglo-Norman period, so what happened in Anglo-Saxon, there were developments in the two genres, poetry and prose, while in Anglo-Norman there was poetry, romances, mystery and morality plays. Here we have just two genres, poetry and drama. So novel was not developed till that age. All right, so that is why we just consider only two genres here. Okay, humanism. Before going into the detail of what poetry and which kind of poetry and which kind of dramas were written at that time, I would like to tell you something about humanism. Humanism was a movement, you can say. It was the characteristics of Renaissance literature. Humanism, as the name shows, it is related to the human. All right, it is actually, humanism is the study about human, in which you study humans, you study human psyche, you study human mind, you study human behaviors, human interactions with one another, and it is the man's concern with himself, like as an object of contemplation. You look at the world, you look at how people are living in this world, and on the basis of that you start passing judgments. You just criticize, you sometimes appreciate how people are living here in this world. So that is what is related to the humanism. Okay, let's read them. One of the major characteristics of Renaissance literature is humanism. Humanism was a movement that focused its interest on the proper study of mankind. They wanted that mankind should be properly studied. Humanism means man's concern with himself as an object of contemplation. So that is basically, it is interest on the proper study of mankind, like as I have said earlier, that what people do, what are their interests, what are their behaviors, what are their attitudes, such kind of study. So it is man's concern with himself as an object of contemplation. It means man just contemplate himself. Contemplate means just present himself, copy himself, mimic himself. This movement was started in Italy by Dante, Petrarch and Boccaccio in the 14th century. So it was not the product of English literature or the product of Britain. Rather, it was started in Italy. Italy was the center of art at that time. So Dante, Petrarch and Boccaccio, they are the philosophers as well as writers, literary figures who had started this movement in 14th century. Okay, what are aspects of humanism? Okay, there are four aspects of humanism, point of views of humanism, that what we have to deal in the humanism. First aspect of humanism was the influence of Greek studies and literature. All right, so what they said, when you need to talk about the humanity, you talk about the people who lived in the past. So it is better that you start discussing them from the perspective of Greek studies, Greek literature. Why? Because Greek studies and literature is that which also take into consideration the human aspect, the human um, dealings, human problems, psyche, mind, everything. So there is an influence of Greek studies and literature on the writings, on the poetry and dramas of Renaissance period. The first Englishman who wrote under the influence of Greek studies was Sir Thomas More. His Utopia in Latin was suggested by Plato's Republic. So, what happened? First Englishman who was influenced by the Greek studies was Sir Thomas More. Another question is that from which personality he was inspired? He was inspired from the Plato, and Plato had composed his work, that is Republic, so it was suggested by the Plato. That is what we called as humanistic aspect. All right. Sir Philip Sidney's defense of poesy advocated the critical rules of the ancient Greeks. So another inspiration that we find of the Greeks is in the Sir Philip Sidney's defense of poesy, in which that is defense of poetry, in which he advocated critical rules of the ancient Greeks. Next we have second aspect. The second aspect of humanism was the discovery of external universe. Number one was influence of the Greek literature. Number two, there's discovery of external universe. They started pondering on the world. They started thinking about that what is around us and how the universe is, what the external universe is all about. They wanted to discover the external universe. So they focused on the individuality and uniqueness. For example, Christopher Marlowe's Dr. Faustus, Tamberlane. In Dr. Faustus we have there's an aspect of external universe. He was physician, also a scientist, you can say. He was a learned person, and he also used to explore the space, the science, the extraordinary, you can say, the metaphysical things. That is why it is related to that. Okay. The third aspect of humanism was the enhanced sensitivities to formal beauty and the cultivation of the aesthetic sense. So, what they did, they were actually sensitive to the formal beauty. Formal beauty means beauty of the world, natural beauty. So Greeks were also inspired by that beauty, and that beauty and its inspiration had been continued in the poetry and dramas of Renaissance age. And the purpose of the appreciation of that beauty was aesthetic, means related to your senses. So aesthetic player was there. So we find its example in Euphuism by John Lilly. We have talked about it in our previous lecture, or maybe in a later lecture we will discuss. Okay. Next we have the fourth impact of humanism was that men came to be regarded as responsible for their own actions, as Cassius says to Brutus in Julius Caesar. The fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars, but in ourselves, that we are underlings. Yes, the fourth impact is that men came to be regarded as responsible for their own actions. Like it was considered that whatever we are doing, it is because our actions had made us do it is because of our own will that we are doing such kind of actions, and we are responsible for such whatever the circumstances we face after our actions. We are responsible, mean we are responsible for whatever consequences our actions bring into the world. So in Julius Caesar, that was by William Shakespeare. It's a play by William Shakespeare, and there are characters in Julius Caesar, that is Cassius and Brutus. Cassius and Brutus were actually the friends of Julius Caesar. Alright, so they said the fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars. So Cassius is saying that there is nothing wrong in our stars, but in ourselves, that it is in ourselves, that it is because of our own actions that had brought our downfall. It is not the fault of the stars, that whatever, it is not predestined, it is not predetermined that we are going to have this fall. Rather, we ourselves are responsible for whatever we do. That was the fourth aspect of humanism. So these are different aspects, like of the influence of Greek literature, sensitivities to aesthetic beauty, all right, and responsible for the own action, while the second aspect is the discovery of the external universe. They were actually the four aspects of humanism, and these themes were carried on by the writers of Renaissance age, and they produced poetry and drama on its basis. Okay, next we have Renaissance or Elizabethan drama. Before going into the detail of the drama, I would like to define the term that is Elizabethan. Why it is called Elizabethan as well? Because in 1550s, Queen Elizabeth, she sat on the throne. All right, she was the queen of the England, and she was very much, she was a literature lover. She actually promoted the literature, art, drama, poetry. That is why it is called as Elizabethan era or Renaissance era. And the drama is also named that because she was the one person who actually promoted, she was the patronage of Elizabethan drama. Okay, first period of Elizabethan drama was dominated by Latin dramas written by. So what happened? Elizabethan drama had different periods. In the first period, it was English. Formerly, the drama was written in Latin language. That is why we say that the Latin dramas were dominated at that time, and later on English dramas, they were written by dramatists of British dramatists. All right. So Terence, Plautus, Seneca, these were the names of dramatists who wrote Latin dramas. Okay, influence of Latin dramas on English dramatists. So what happened? The English dramatists were influenced by the Latin dramatists. Okay, these plays influenced what? These plays influenced English playwriters, and they wrote what they wrote. First comedy was written in English language. It was Ralph Roister Doister by Nicholas Odell. All right. So first tragedy that was written at that time was Gorboduc by Thomas Sackville. Okay, the second period of Elizabethan drama was dominated by the university wit, a professional set of literary men. So you can say they were all of them. They were studying in the university, so that is why it is named the university wits. They were also seeking education as well as producing some masterpieces in the field of drama. So their names are John Lilly, George Peele, Thomas Kite, Robert Greene, Christopher Marlowe, Ben Jonson, and William Shakespeare. So they are called as university wits. Okay, so major works of university wits playwrights, though they are called as playwrights, so their major work are John Lilly has written Euphues, Compass, Endymion, etc. George Peele had written The Arraignment of Paris, 1584, David and Bathsheba. Thomas Kite had written The Spanish Tragedy. Robert Greene, Friar Bacon and Friar Bungay. Christopher Marlowe, he had written Tamburlaine, Dr. Faustus, The Jew of Malta. Ben Jonson, he wrote Every Man in His Humor and Every Man Out of Humor. Okay, so let's talk about the great dramatist of all times, that is William Shakespeare, the greatest of all Elizabethan dramatists. Alright, there were other dramatists as well, but he was, he was and he is, and hopefully he will be the best dramatist of that time. Alright, so his there are four periods of his work: 1577 to 93, 1594 to 1600, 1601 to 1608, 1608 to 1612. In first period from 1577 to 93, he wrote such books as he wrote plays on three parts of Henry VI and Titus Andronicus. His first comedies, that is Love's Labour Lost, The Two Gentlemen of Verona, The Comedy of Errors, and A Midsummer Night's Dream. His first chronicle play, that is Richard III, A Youthful Tragedy, Romeo and Juliet. It was written in his first period, like 1577 to 93. Okay, let's talk about 1594 to 1600, that is second period. So he wrote such plays as Richard II, King John, The Merchant of Venice, Henry IV, Part 1 and 2, Henry V, The Taming of the Shrew, The Merry Wives of Windsor, Much Ado About Nothing, As You Like It, and Twelfth Night. In period 3 from 1608 to 1601 to 1608, he wrote Julius Caesar, Hamlet, All Is Well That Ends Well, Mayor for Mayor, Troilus and Cressida, Othello, King Lear, Macbeth, Antony and Cleopatra, and Timons of Athens. Okay, in the last period, that is from 1608 to 1612, he wrote Cymbeline, The Tempest, and The Winter Plays. Alright, so he has written such great works in this time period. Okay, I would like to conclude this lecture by saying that the Renaissance age is considered as one of the most significant ages in the history of English literature, as literature flourished in three main genres of literature, namely poetry, prose, and drama. So prose writing, in prose we talk about Francis Bacon. So I have not discussed it in detail. We will discuss it in the next lecture.